The reply was, "We have lived in strict obedience to the commandments of God and have not fallen by disobedience like those on earth." Then I saw 2 trees. One looked much like the tree of life in the city. The fruit of both looked beautiful, but one they could not eat. They had power to eat of both, but were forbidden to eat of one. Then my attending angel said, "None in this place have tasted of the forbidden tree. If they should eat, they would fall." Satan is still in this universe. There is still the ability for us to decide on Satan's side or on God's side. And in this universe, on fallen worlds, angels alike can make that choice. The great controversy begins. The world has fallen. And it fell on the point of something to eat. We go on down and we see the great controversy played out in many different people's lives throughout history. And in the biblical account, we see people like Cain and Abel. They bring their offerings to God. God instructed them to bring a lamb, which signified Him being the lamb that would redeem this world. And Abel brought his lamb like God had asked, and Cain brought his best. But it wasn't what God asked. Cain didn't like that Abel's offering was accepted of God and his best fruits weren't. And so he kills his brother. The first 2 boys born in this world, one kills the other. Do you think the universe looking on looked at that and went, "Wow, what happened?" I mean, they'd never seen that before. They'd never seen an intelligent being created in the image of God die. And Satan rejoiced. We come on down through history and we see the flood. And this is powerful to me in reading it because we've always heard the story of the flood. Noah and his family were righteous, as we're told in the Bible. But it doesn't seem like there was many others in the world that were. And God told him to prepare something that there was no use for, and it was a boat. And there was no use for it then in the world. The world did not have oceans as we know it now. It was not covered with water everywhere. It had water in certain places, but why would you build a boat on dry land? But Noah believed God, and he built that. And for 120 years, he preached to people. And this should give us a lot of courage when we try to share it with people, I think. He shared with people what God had said. You need to get in the boat so that you'll be saved. That was his message. It was a simple test. All you need to do is get in the boat. And when the 120 years were up, the animals came into the boat at God's command. God told Noah and his family to come in the boat, and they did. And no one else. He gave his life in preaching for a world that no one came. And if the great controversy had ended right there with 8 people on God's side and a world on the devil's side, it would seem as though the devil won. And I hate to say that, but the whole world, it says that every imagination of men continually was evil. Everything. And God said, no, it can't go on this way. There's got to be at least a chance for people in this world to know. There has got to be a remnant in this world that know God. The flood came. We come on down past there to, I think of Abraham and Sodom. Abraham was a righteous man. He commanded his household after him. He was considered a godly man in his day. But he lived, as I picture it, down the hill was this city, Sodom, which was very wicked. And the angels come to destroy the wickedness because it was just like it was in the days of Noah. It was evil continually all the time. There was nothing good of it. There wasn't hardly a chance for good. There wasn't even hardly a choice for good. And Abraham pleads as an advocate in this great struggle between good and evil. He pleads. He says, if there's only a few people, won't you save Sodom? And the angels said yes. And there wasn't that many. And the only people that were in there, it was debatable whether they were even good or not, but they did profess the name of God, was Lot and his family. 4 people. And his wife loved that city so much she couldn't even obey the angels. So it tells you how devoted they were to God's command. I come on down and I think of Daniel in Babylon. And you think this great empire, and you've got Daniel. And it's just that contrast in the great controversy. Good versus evil. God versus Satan's rule. And I think of Daniel's 3 friends when they were commanded to bow down to this image that represented the worship of Satan, the worship of this world, and they said no. And we only have record that 3 men stood up on that plain, and there was part of a Jewish nation that lived there that knew God's commandments, and only 3 men stood up. And they didn't worry about the consequences because they knew they were death. And that's when the great controversy really shone forth. In front of the most powerful monarch of this world had known to that time, 3 men stood up that were slaves. And they said, no, we won't serve you. We won't serve your God, because it's not the God of the universe. And he throws them in the fire. And you don't think the fire was hot? Well, it killed the soldiers that took them up there. And then the most powerful ruler in the world looked into the face of Jesus Christ in that fire. And his knees knocked together, and he was as if he was going to faint. And he said, did we not cast 3 people in there? And I see 4. Had he seen Jesus before? No. Did he recognize him? Yes. He said, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. The powers of this world, be they evil, be they satanic, always recognize Jesus Christ. But I think the most powerful example that we have of the great controversy in history is Jesus' life here on this earth. As a child, the devil wanted to destroy him. And so all the children in the area where he was born, under 2 years of age, were destroyed. But God told his parents to go to Egypt. And that was prophesied. I think that's amazing, that my son will come out of Egypt. Years later, when the ruler, Herod, was dead, he was allowed to come back out of Egypt. And at 12 years old, Jesus goes to the temple, and he sees that lamb slain, and he realizes, that is me. He realized his part in this plan of redemption at 12 years old. How many children at 12 years old have that kind of insight from God? Amazing life, directed by his Father. At 30 years old, when Jesus was baptized, he came out of the water being baptized by John. He came out of the water, and it says the heavens opened, and his Father said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased. And that must have rankled Satan to the uttermost, because that is about the exact same words that was used in heaven, 4,000 or however many years before. We don't know how far before creation Satan fell. When the Father said, Jesus is equal to me. He is the same. He does my will. And at his baptism, Jesus said again, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. a divine revelation. But right after that, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. He had to face off with the devil. He had to measure weapons, if you will say, with the devil. But this wasn't a fight of power, because if it had been a fight of power, Satan never would have been cast out of heaven. He would have been destroyed, just gone. It wasn't a fight of power. Going back to when this earth fell, she makes a statement that Satan knew that right then and there, the creator of this world would destroy Adam and Eve. And forever, Satan would be able to say that his way was better because God would not allow it. God came up with an alternative. And that was Jesus Christ coming to this earth. We see him after his baptism. He goes into the wilderness. It says, in the wilderness of temptation, in the Garden of Gethsemane, and on the cross, our Savior measured weapons with the Prince of Darkness. His wounds became the trophies of his victory in behalf of the race. When Christ hung in agony upon the cross, while evil spirits rejoiced and evil men reviled, then indeed his, Christ's heel, was bruised by Satan. But that very act was crushing the serpent's head. He goes off into the wilderness for 40 days and he fasts. Has anyone fasted here 40 days? How do you do when you're tired and when you're hungry and when all you want is something to eat and to sleep? How do you do with facing temptation or struggle or difficult situations in your life? 40 days he was without food. That's not far from being dead. And then the devil came to him and said, make these stones into bread. Now that is no temptation for us at all, because you don't have the power. I don't have the power. But the question wasn't just give yourself something to eat. He said, if you are the Son of God, make these stones into bread. Now that's a totally different temptation. He knew that he was the Son of God. And he was hungry. There's no doubt about that. His body was emaciated. What did Jesus say to that? It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. How do you face the devil? How do you face the great controversy in your life? Jesus Christ faced it with the Bible, because it is his word. He was taken to the top of the temple, one of the pinnacles, and Satan said, throw yourself down and the angels will bear you up in their hands. If you're the Son of God was the question that started all of this. And he said, no, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. It's like, wow. And then the third one, I think, is the most powerful. It says that Satan took him up into a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of this world, made it pass before him. Now this is a divine struggle. I mean, Satan was given the ability to portray before Jesus Christ all the kingdoms of this world. And he said, I will give you these kingdoms. Now, did Satan have the power to give Christ those kingdoms?